There is a line in Cars that I think about way more than I should for a movie about talking vehicles.
There was a lot left in me.
It is such a plain sentence. There's no big speech, no dramatic monologue about glory or fame, or needing one last trophy. He is saying something smaller and sadder than that. He was not done, but other people decided that he was. People brush past that part of Doc's story when they talk about him.
He won 3 piston cups.
He did what in his cup?
The easy version is that he was famous, he crashed, he got forgotten, and then he became bitter. But the movie does not really say that he was forgotten. The fabulous Hudson Hornet still meant something. Racing fans still remembered him just fine.
Whoa, look, man. It's the Hudson Hornet. Whoa.
You see, the part that did not survive was the industry's willingness to deal with him as a living, damaged person. That is a much uglier story. Doc did not become worthless, he became inconvenient, and a lot of capitalism is just teaching people to confuse those two things. So yes, Cars is a movie where Lightning McQueen learns humility and stops treating everyone like furniture. Great. But underneath that, there's a whole other story about what happens after a system gets the most profitable version of you and decides that the rest is not worth fixing. The racing world did not have a problem with Doc as a legend. Legends are manageable. You can talk about the old wins, keep the trophy around, sell the history, and let everyone feel like the sport has a soul. But the person is much more annoying than that. The person gets injured, needs time, and might come back slower or angrier or harder to package. That is where Doc became a problem. Fans can remember him with real affection, but fans are not the people cutting checks. They are not the sponsors deciding who is still worth the risk. They are not the team looking at an older racer and wondering whether the comeback story is worth the money. Capitalism gets sly here because it can give you symbolic love when actual care gets too expensive. It can clap for you while you're useful and then hand you nostalgia once you're not. Doc's trophies do not prove that the system cared about him, they prove that the system knew how to profit from him, and there is a huge difference, and Doc seems like someone who learned that difference the hard way. And let me just say, Radiator Springs starts to feel a lot less like a cozy little retirement town and more like the place you go when you've seen the machine too clearly. Doc did not leave because fame hurt his feelings, he left because fame turned out to be useless when he actually needed something. Marx obviously did not predict Doc Hudson himself, which is a shame because I would watch a Pixar adaptation of Capital immediately, but he did predict the trick happening to him. The idea that we need to look at here is the difference between use value and exchange value. Use value is what something can actually do. A coat keeps you warm, a tool helps you fix something, stuff like that. Exchange value, on the other hand, is what something can sell for. Can it be priced, packaged, and made to generate more money than it costs? Put Doc in that frame and the whole movie gets much clearer. After the crash, Doc still has a ridiculous amount of value. He can diagnose problems, he can judge, he can read a track better than lightning can read a conversation. He knows what speed does to people when they start worshipping it. In Radiator Springs, he is not dead weight. He is the doctor, the judge, the old guy who knows exactly which young idiot is about to learn something the expensive way. The racing business does not care about any of that though. It wants the version of Doc that wins races, draws cameras, keeps sponsors happy, and looks like the future. After the crash, Doc is a risk, a recovery project, an old model with a story that no longer looks clean. When Doc says that he had a lot left in him, he's not asking for pity because he lost fame, he is pointing at the scam. The market asked, can we still sell him? It never asked, what can he still give? This is how someone with years of skill and judgment gets treated like a bad investment. Doc's trophy room should feel triumphant, but it does not. It feels like walking into a room full of evidence. The trophies say that he won, people cheered, and the fabulous Hudson Hornet mattered. What they do not say is what it cost him, or what happened after the cost got too high. Marx called this commodity fetishism. The object looks clean while the human relationships behind it disappear. You see the trophy, not the labor. You see the shine, not the body. You see the championship, not the institution that loved the winning and abandoning the wreckage. That room feels so uncomfortable because those trophies are supposed to honor Doc, but they also remind him of the moment that he learned what honor was worth. The racing world could point at them and say, look, we celebrated you, but then all Doc could do was look back and say, and then what? A trophy proves that you were profitable, but it does not prove that you were loved. Doc does not act like someone who retired. Retired people usually love talking about the thing they used to do. They will tell you the same story 9 times and swear that, oh, this time is different, I promise. But Doc does the exact opposite. He locks the past away and gets angry when Lightning finds out because he does not want the trophy seen and does not want the old version of himself dragged back into the room. And I don't know about you, but that to me does not feel like peace. It feels more like shame. Alienation describes this perfectly, not as a vocabulary word that you drop so people know that you read theory, but as a way to describe what Doc looks like. Alienation is what happens when someone becomes separated from their own work, their own activity, or their own life. Doc loved racing, and then racing made that love feel stupid. The crash hurt his body, but the replacement hurt something stranger. It made the most alive part of him feel embarrassing. The thing that once gave him meaning only mattered when it could be turned into wins, and once that stopped, even the love itself started to look naive. And people know this feeling outside of movies. You give years to a job, a sport, a channel, a craft, a company, then your body starts to break, the numbers dip, the algorithm changes, or the company decides to restructure, which is just a very boring word for ruining someone's year. Suddenly, the thing that you built your life around treats you like an item on a line. Doc's injury is bigger than just losing the role, because that part of the injury is realizing the role never loved you back, and Doc knows that, and so he buries the whole thing before it can humiliate him again. Lightning McQueen arrives in Radiator Springs as a perfectly engineered nightmare for Doc. He's loud, shiny, sponsored, and lonely in a way that he does not yet understand. He thinks that every room is a press conference. And in that way, he's very easy to hate, but he's also very easy to sell. Doc sees the packaging immediately. He does not get fooled. Lightning is more than just an annoying rookie. He's the next product in the line, young enough to market, and naive enough to mistake attention for love. Marx wrote about the reserve army of labor, the pool of people waiting behind every worker, ready to replace them. The basic idea is not complicated. Capitalism runs smoother when everyone knows that someone else is always available. Do not slow down, do not ask for too much, do not become expensive, and do not get hurt, because there is always another you waiting to replace you. And the sad part is that Doc lived that exact thing. So when Lightning shows up, Doc is looking at two things at once, the kid that replaced him and the kid being prepared for the same machine. The racing world flatters Lightning the same way it once flattered Doc. It tells him that winning is identity, sponsorship is affection, and visibility is worth. If enough cameras point at you, then maybe you are safe. But Doc now knows better. Eventually, the question comes for everyone in that world. Can we still sell him? When the answer changes, the love changes with it. Doc's anger has more in it than bitterness because he recognizes the cycle. The replacement is also future wreckage. Guy Debord wrote about the spectacle, which is one of those ideas that sounds more complicated than it actually is. Basically, it's a world where images start standing in for life. Racing in cars is a spectacle all the way down. It's lights, cameras, announcers, paint jobs, sponsored decals, heroic montages, and crowds trained to confuse speed with freedom. Inside that world, Doc survives just fine as an image. The fabulous Hudson Hornet is useful as a story about old glory, racing heritage, and proof that the sport has history. But the living Doc is a messier story. He is not a clean poster. He is a reminder that the sport makes wreckage and then edits that wreckage out of the commercial. Debord has a line that fits almost too well here. The spectacle is capital accumulated to the point that it becomes image. Doc's labor becomes a trophy that becomes a legend, and that legend becomes content. Meanwhile, the person is in a small town pretending that none of it happened. And this happens constantly. Hall of Fame plaques are cheaper than healthcare, anniversary posts are cheaper than pensions, and calling someone a legend is cheaper than changing the conditions that broke them. The system keeps the same story, and Doc keeps the wound. The ugliest part of all of this is that none of it sounds evil while it's happening. Nobody is saying we are abandoning Doc because its exchange value dropped. They say normal things like, oh, that's just racing, that's business. You can't live in the past. We need fresh talent. The sport has moved on. Gramsci talked about this exact thing. Power lasts when its assumptions become common sense, not because everyone sits down and agrees to be cruel, but because the system's logic starts sounding like adulthood. Abandonment becomes realism, disposal becomes progress, and repair becomes sentimentability. Once that language takes over, nobody has to feel guilty. The machine can do something cruel and describe it like it's weather. And Doc's pain comes from that as well. Racing moved on, and everyone acted like moving on settled the question. But the question was never whether the sport could move on, because of course it could. The question was what it owed to the people that it used to get there. Doc Hudson is a cartoon car, which makes it all the more annoying how recognizable he is. You see him in sports where athletes get called warriors until the injury report turns them into liabilities and the same body that made the spectacle becomes a cost problem. You see him at work where people get praised as essential right up to when they need accommodations, time off, workers' comp, or a slower pace. You see him in the stuff that we buy. Phones, laptops, appliances, even cars. So many products are harder to repair now than they need to be because the replacement makes cleaner money than maintenance. If Doc Hudson were an object, the logic would be simple. Do not fix it, just replace it. Do not ask what is still useful, ask what sells next. Older workers get caught in the exact same trap. The economy tells them that retirement is impossible, then hiring managers quietly treat age like a defect. Keep working, but please stop being old in a way that costs us money. This is the Doc Hudson problem. The system uses people until their breaking point, then teaches everyone to call their replacement progress. Radiator Springs is easy to dismiss as the sweet part of the movie, a cute small town with neon lights and old roads, but the town is more dangerous than that, at least to the racing world's logic. Radiator Springs is not outside the economy. People work there, businesses exist there, Doc is the doctor and the judge, so yes, you can still talk about services, roles, and social usefulness in practical terms. But the town does not value Doc the same way the racing world did. In Radiator Springs, Doc does not have to be a clean brand asset before he's allowed to belong. He matters because people know him, they need him, they argue with him, they rely on him, and remember him as more than just the version of himself that could win races. Mark Fisher wrote about capitalist realism, the feeling that capitalism is the only serious reality and everything else outside of it seems childish or impossible. The movie sets a trap here, because the race circuit feels like the real world, and Radiator Springs feels like the fantasy. But maybe that's backwards. Maybe the fantasy is believing that the racing machine ever loved Doc back. Maybe the small town is not sentimental decoration, but the only place in the movie where Doc's value is not limited to whether he can be sold as a product. Doc does not heal because racing finally finds another use for him. He heals because he starts to believe that his knowledge, care, memory, and skill still count outside the narrow market that discarded him. The final race is easy to read the wrong way. Doc becomes Lightning's crew chief, and the audience gets the thrill of seeing the old master back near the track. But the point is not that Doc matters again because racing can still use him. As much as the market would love that angle, the better way to view it is simple. Doc was already valuable, and the race finally makes that impossible to ignore. His wisdom did not become real when the cameras saw it. His experience did not become useful because he re-entered the spectacle. Radiator Springs had already proved it. Lightning had already proved it. The town had already proved it. It was the racing world that was the problem. Doc was never empty after the crash. He was not a broken object whose only possible meaning was nostalgia. He was a person with experience the system did not know how to count. Capitalism recognizes talent constantly. It just asks a very small set of questions. Can it win? Can it sell? Can it scale? Can it be branded? Can it be replaced cheaply when numbers change? Care, memory, patience, repair, mentorship, dignity, all of that gets treated like extra, and it's nice if it helps the main thing, but invisible if it does not. Doc's useful life was never over, only the profitable version had expired. Doc Hudson is not painful because he lost fame. In fact, fame is the least interesting thing that he lost, in my opinion. He lost the ability to believe that the institution cheering for him had ever cared about him as a person, and that is a hard lesson to learn. A crowd can remember you while the business moves on. A trophy can preserve your image while hiding the cost of producing it. A market can take the most alive part of you, sell it back to the world, and then act confused when you're hurt by the transaction. Doc's story exposes the gap between being valuable and being marketable. The athlete whose injury makes them disposable, the worker praised until they need protection, the older employee told to keep working but treated like expired inventory, the creator rewarded for output until burnout makes them vanish, the device that could be repaired but gets replaced because repair interrupts the business model. All of those are living inside some version of Doc's line, "I had a lot left in me," but they moved on anyway. Capitalism needs you to accept one lie. If the market is done with you, then you must be done. Doc refuses that lie, even if it takes him most of his life to do it. Doc mattered when he was fast, he mattered when he was hurt, and he still mattered when nobody could sell him. His life, his skill, his memory, and his care were never reducible to what the racing world could still extract from him. Capitalism cannot count that part, and it is the part of Doc Hudson that survives.